lot of information right now, but I certainly can follow up as we go. I think it will be a process that will take all year. It's something that we've talked about just briefly and said that we wanted to be open and closed within 1 year of executive, so it would be done at the end of April. The reasoning for why this is coming up, I don't think it's just around third-party ancillary fees. Certainly within the student union, third-party ancillary fees don't really focus, aren't really a part of BUSAC. But I got the impression she wants to just do some general updates as well to the entire omnibus agreement. There's a school or two that have a model, health being one of them that she liked and wanted to update according to that. What I'm doing is, I think I said over Twitter as well, and through my report, I'm asking every school for their agreements. And what I did at CASA this past week was talk to a couple Calgary schools, and they're going through some of their agreements with the universities. So I want to ensure, whatever is updated or done is in best practice with other schools. We're not doing something that we shouldn't be doing, or overlooking something that the student union would want to look over with third-party ancillary fees. I'm sure they will be brought into the conversations as well. I don't just want to channel it through me. Right now, I assume we will start having, in which once we do, I'll keep everybody updated, and I'm sure it will take more than just a week or a month or two to get done. So hopefully that answered stuff.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I have 4, but 2 of them are yes or no, so I'll be fairly quick. All of them directed at Mr. Yen. So, Mr. Yen, is it true that during the April 10th meeting of Board of Directors, you voted in favor for adding several amended bylaws to the BUSAC policies and procedures?
So the Board of Directors in its entirety, along with the executive of 2013-2014, approved the addition of documents into the policy and procedures. However, they're not, just because they're in the format of a bylaw doesn't mean that they are a bylaw. They are in the policies and procedures, and therefore they are policies and procedures as added to a document to avoid the death of legislation that comes inevitably at the end of a fiscal year. In our case, that's April 30th every year. And these were done on a temporary basis with the understanding that they were to go back to BUSAC at its earliest possible convenience in order for them to be approved as bylaws.
Okay, so my next question then is, I guess, in regards to that. So, as we kind of talked about, the policy and procedures manual states, pretty clearly in the introduction that, quote, that this policy and procedures manual shall in no time circumvent any policy that may be outlined through the BUSAC Constitution or BUSAC bylaws. So, by that standard, any of those proposed amendments that are included in the manual don't have the weight of a bylaw, correct?
No, because if you look very clearly at Article 16 of the BUSAC Constitution and you read the hierarchy of legislation, and the hierarchy of legislation, policy, and procedure supersedes that of the bylaw and anything that falls below it.
But in the manual itself, it says that anything in it can't circumvent bylaws. I know what you're talking about, it does say it, but it also says directly in the procedures manual. Is that correct that it says that?
Correct, and what I will say in response to that is, if you read the Constitution and the hierarchy of legislation, what comes higher, the Constitution or policy and procedure? No, I'm asking you that question.
It does say that.
Okay.
And then the final part of the question was that, I guess related to that, was on the last BUSAC meeting on May 4th, you served as interim speaker for that meeting. During that meeting, you approved and had on the agenda a motion regarding the governance committee, which was one of the proposed changes. Given this, how do you argue that any of those changes have any kind of weight to them, given what we just talked about with what it says in the policy and procedure manual?
So, given that, as outlined, the addition of the policy and procedure was done primarily to avoid the death of legislation at the end of the fiscal year, and in doing that, it was the full intent to bring it back, as the governance committee last year can attest to. If you ask any of the members of the committee, it was designed to come back to BUSAC at its earliest possible convenience. The reason it didn't come back in May for review is simply because the committee had not yet met in any iteration to be able to present that to BUSAC, nor did the committee feel that BUSAC would be best equipped to be able to answer any questions or question the legislation simply because they had no training on what bylaws, policies, standing orders, any of that stuff was. And the idea was for it to come back at this retreat today and be presented to council. However, because of some of the difficulties we've had with members of the committee either not being present throughout the summer or not being responsive to emails, it's been very difficult to be able to get that sort of information forward to bring it to council. So as a result of which, that's why we sit in this sort of limbo where we have this temporary policy and procedure designed simply to hold us between the gap in fiscal years rather than as a long-term policy. And I know that what you've addressed previously in the beginning of a policy and procedure where it says it's not designed to circumvent a bylaw, this never was designed to circumvent a bylaw. This was designed to get around the collapse of the legislative kind of barrier that we have at the end of the year and the fact that this forum in our second to last meeting, and give the committee the impetus and the ability to have the information that it had last year carried over. I think anyone here can attest to, if they've spent any time within BUSAC, they know that there's no guarantee that the members of a committee will be the same members as they were last year, as a result of which a lot of stuff gets dropped on the cutting room floor and never to be found again. And so that was the reason this was added to the policy and procedures.
Is there any other questions? Mr. Marshall?
The changes to the 4 bylaws, why were they so urgent that after the April 8th meeting when you couldn't pass them at BUSAC that you had to pass them 2 days later at board? Like, why did you need them right away? Why couldn't you just wait until May 4th and today's meeting to pass them properly?
Again, as I identified, because of the May 4th meeting, council was not equipped to be able to take that information forward. One of them, the Secretary of Corporation bylaw, there's very explicit changes in there that deal with the changes in the Not-for-Profit Act, and we wanted to make sure that those were implemented as soon as possible because there's a requirement on us as an organization to have those implemented. Another one was that in the case of bylaw 2400 in the governance committee, obviously this is a committee that struck in May, and we wanted to make sure that it began its work, and it had to deal with the fact that there were interim student senator positions that needed to be either, I guess, corroborated by the university as to whether or not those people were available to the positions. And the third bylaw was the committee of committee chairs, which, in all honesty, was done simply because there were a couple of bylaws going on the docket at the same time they were added in that petition.
Okay. Is there any other questions from the gallery?
Question for Mr. Dermody.
Yes.
A question about COCA. Can you tell me about what COCA is, what BUSAC's involvement with COCA is in the past few years and this year?
So COCA is the Canadian campus of, it's entertainment gathering of different schools and different institutions across Canada, both college and university. Great place to, it's much of what we do there is we connect with other schools and we base a lot of the entertainment that we do, a lot of the events that we do from other schools for our current year. So I had the chance to talk about Wellness Week, expand that thought, and one of the schools that we did discuss that with for some of that too, are picking that aspect up again this year. And we're able to talk to different singer-songwriters, different acts. We collaborate with different schools on many of our events through COCA. It's an amazing experience. It's easier for us to plan our year now, knowing who's with who and who's doing what, and how to save us money in the forefront. It's basically what we do there. We talk to different members of the alliance, and we jot down, take a pen and a paper, just figure out who's doing what on what day. The more people that buy in, the easier achievement's going to be for people to have a better time against us.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the gallery?
Question for Mr. Gann. Are any of the 3 policies or documents that are in the policies and procedures in effect? The governance committee, for example, has it met, and is it already in effect?
Absolutely, of course they're in effect, simply because the policy and procedure is higher on our legislative hierarchy, and therefore there is a requirement by the organization to meet the policies and procedures as outlined, and there was a requirement by the governance committee to be able to vet senators for the interim student senator position, and therefore, of course, the committee has met.
Thank you. Any other questions from the gallery? We have about 5 minutes left.